You lived here in LA in the 30s, of course.
Yeah.
And I think you said your dad was a grocer,
A,
and
a wholesale producer.
wholesale produce guy,
Yeah.
and had a lot of contact with a lot of Japanese grocers as well, Issei and Nisei people.
Yeah, these were farmers. They were truck farmers, I guess you call them. They grew all the greenery and stuff like that. So they had the two generations. There was talk around that when the Japanese came in, that they were going to take over California and things were going to change and they were going to join forces with the enemy. Well, my dad heard them too, and he said he realized that some of them, were strictly pro-Japanese and they were going to do everything they could to help the Japanese if once they arrived here. We didn't know what large force it would be, but it was expected that they would land here. So there was a good reason for putting them away. Another thing is that in those days there was a lot of emotion. Like my friend who was Lenz Murakami and his family, they had a grocery store. And there would have been atrocities committed because everybody, they were slant eyes now, they were slant eyes and so on, and you would have people, killing those bastards and so on. So we would have had a lot of incidents and their lives would have been lost. I reacted emotionally when they first started talking about that because I had friends who were Japanese and who were my age, and so on, and they certainly were not enemies or potential enemies at all. There were some small subs that they captured. I think there were one or two incidents off of the California coast. There were blackouts then in case. We were expecting them to hit California. They had the upper hand. I must have heard it Sunday on the radio while I was at work that Pearl Harbor had happened. I was shocked like everybody else. I couldn't believe it, Japan doing that. And they were having peace talks at the same time. Oh, they were really taking over in China, and really there were a lot of atrocities. They weren't very good when they were victorious. And actually the government really wanted to go to war, but they needed some kind of excuse so the populace would go along with it. And when Pearl Harbor happened, why? Well, my going back to school plans went out the window. They classified me as a necessary worker, a B classification or something, which would keep me out of the war. But I wasn't having any of that, So I was young enough then to realize that I had to go to the service. I volunteered and went into the service, the Navy. I think I reported to an office downtown there someplace. They asked me what I wanted, and I said small craft. I thought, small craft. They put me on a battleship. When I went aboard, it was in New Jersey that this ship was being built. Oh, Bayonne, New Jersey.
Oh, Bayonne.
Bayonne,
Oh.
yes. And they were just finishing up. And so I went aboard. So that was a good opportunity to learn the situation because, man, it was just a massive piping to me. I was kind of awed, And I thought, how am I going to learn all this stuff? But I got in on kind of the ground floor and had some familiarity with it when the rest of the crew was put aboard. I went on the shakedown cruise. That gave me a head start because other people came on later. Then we were ready to get involved in the war. And what happened is that the Wolf Pack was extremely successful in the East, out of New York there, in the Atlantic. And we were suffering a great loss. The Wolf Pack was just, the damage there was worse than the damage in Pearl Harbor. Finally, we wound up in Newfoundland, and we were there for a few days, and it was cold, my God, cold at sea, In that deal, we were using mostly ash cans. What you do is, if they suspect or pick up on a fact that a submarine around, or if one of them fires at you, you know that they're around, then you drop these ash cans, and they look like big barrels. And then later you'll see oil from explosions of the submarine. When we left there, we had killed the Wolf Pack. I mean, we hadn't done it by ourselves, but we had killed the menace, and we were just wiped them out. A lot of stuff we learned by rumor, scuttlebutt, But in the case of the president, they told us that we were going to have the president aboard. I think they tightened security because they didn't want us going ashore and telling anybody, And so the president did come aboard. There was an incident about a torpedo, but I think it was a friendly torpedo, and it blew up just off of our bow. That got lost it was one of our ships misfired. I think it was a destroyer. And the ship took the shock. Well, the first thing I wanted to know was the president all right, you know. And he was fine. In fact, he appeared, you know. And he spoke to us and everything, you know, and said, you know, made a little speech and said everything was fine and thanked us, you know. We didn't see him in a wheelchair.
Oh, you didn't?
No. He was standing up on the foredeck, you know, and he was, of course, he had the rails.
Yeah. So
And-
he was propped up. He propped himself up on the rail.
Yeah, and he spoke to us. And the thing that I knew there'd been rumors about his health, and when I was looking at him, I realized that he was ashen gray. So then we went from there. We went to Sierra Leone, and then he was taken off in Sierra Leone, and he went to Tehran. They had the talks there, and then we swung around, and we went through the Straits of Gibraltar, past Spain, and we were supposed to be a ship whose potential was not really ascertained by the enemy yet. They didn't know, you know, what we could do, how fast we were, what our ranges were, and so on. So as we passed through the straits, Spain turned their huge lights on us, and we swung the 16s around like this, and they were ordered to douse those lights or we would destroy them, you know. So they did douse them. And then we went from there, we went to Mers el Kiber, which is Algeria, and we were going to wait there until we got orders. Meantime, the German bombers were detected coming after us because we had been, their intelligence had picked up on us, and we were ordered not to fight, you know, and not to engage because our mission was the president. We were ordered to leave the area. So we went to South America and we went to Sao Paulo, and we waited for word there, and we weren't there too long. And we got word that it was time to go to pick up the president. So we went to Dakar, French West Africa. We brought him back, and he gave a speech and told us that he was grateful to us and we'd done a wonderful job and all that. After we left the president, we went to Panama Canal, and we went to the Pacific. The first place we hit was the Marshalls, and we were firing at will, you know, and just raking the island. Two of the emplacements never fired. If they fired once, we had them. Of course, as they fired, we demolished. They fired, we demolished. So we got a couple of hits there. It was the superstructure. It didn't hit the lower part of the ship. When you're in a combat situation, you're locked up. Security. You don't break security, although I did once. We had been attacked. It was a submarine, and no one had awakened me to go on watch. When I woke up, I really was, geez, I was out of it. I guess I was exhausted. And what woke me up was this blast, you know, and blasted the ship and everything. And I got up and I went out on, I wanted to see what the hell was going on, you know, because I was at a loss. I didn't know, you know, I might be court-martialed or something. So I went out and I opened the hatch to the deck, and it was an emplacement that was manned by Marines. I guess it was the 40s. Anyway, I said to him, I said, "What happened?" And he turned to me and he said, and what had happened was the torpedo got too close. We couldn't flank it. We couldn't parallel it, which we did many times. But it was so close, we couldn't get away from it. So what you do is you fire into the water right ahead of it. So they were firing, I guess, the 40s and the 20s, and they didn't know whether it was going to hit right where they were, you know. Yeah. So they're firing away, and it exploded, and that's what I felt. That was kind of commonplace to have those torpedoes like that, but we'd parallel a lot of them. They were slow. They have a wake. Just the inner parts were armored. It would probably have gone through. See, what you're protecting is the engine rooms and the equipment. Some people didn't like it because you're trapped down there. So, you know, under combat, everything is secured, and we had superheated steam. And if you breathe superheated steam, if a line carries away, you know, from the vibration or the shock or anything, your lungs are immediately burned. You can't take a breath or anything. You try to get out without breathing, one man at a time. We had burials at sea, and they never even informed us of what happened, you know. But you know, they didn't want to advertise that. They put them in a chute, and the canvas bag is all sewed up, you know. over the side. They have a ceremony. The marshals never became terribly important. Well, these were all steps. And then they began thinking about Truk. As a white hat, you're not supposed to be a military strategist, you know. But they were talking about hitting Truk, and the rumors had it that it could cost us 60,000 men. Even as a white hat, I thought that was a terrible idea, because Truk is a natural fortress, and they had all kinds of Japanese personnel there. Then at the last minute, they changed their mind, and they decided to strangle it. So we threw a cordon of destroyers around it, and submarines were for any supply coming in, and just starved them to death. We assaulted the Marianas. There's Tinian, Saipan, and Guam. Heavy fire, and we're getting Japanese pillboxes, because they were buried all over the place. I think we were there 57 days, if I recall correctly. So we were at GQ for 57 days. There were pillboxes that had been quiet during the whole battle. They had hidden, they hadn't fired. And so they were sending the assault forces up to those pillboxes, and they were able, in those pillboxes, they were able to mow them down. And they sent another wave up there. They called the general there howling mad. He said that they had the situation well in hand, and he wasn't going to call on us. But if they had called on us, all they had to do was pull back, let us have at those pillboxes, because they were identified now. We knew where they were. We were going to blast it out, and they could have walked. Heavy toll, you know. I could see that. The Japanese had been told how brutal we were, and so that was where families, and because they had workers there too, committed suicide. They jumped off the cliffs there on Saipan, I guess it was, yeah. For some reason, we went cold iron. You know, you're on standby all the time, you know, in case anything happens. But when you go cold iron, you know, you have all kinds of things that you'll go through, you know, to come back on the line and everything. So there were 2 spottings. They reported to the bridge. The notice was dismissed. They said it was something else or erroneous. The 3rd time, the guy that spotted something, he insisted that he had something. And so they listened to him and checked it out, found out that a force was coming, full blast, the Japanese Navy. And we got underway. Now, when you going from cold iron, you know, to up to speed and everything, up to pressures, that's supposed to be, we do it gradually by steps, you know, and it takes hours and hours and hours. We were out of there in about 15 minutes, 15, 20 minutes. We were up and steaming and hauling, and we chased the Japanese all day, and they chased us all night. They wanted to close in the nighttime. We wanted to close in the daytime. If we had closed and they had lost their capital ships, the Yamato was kind of a symbol of Japan. If they lost that, it would be psychologically a great blow to the Japanese. So they decided to just keep it out of the battle. Thousands of planes went up, and some of them went so far that their fuel was almost diminished, and they attacked and did a hell of a job. And some of them, when they came back, just barely got to us. If they went down tail first, then you have time to pick them up. The sea was littered with them, but they decided to turn the lights on, and so these planes were coming in all around. If the Japanese had been in the position to, they could have nailed us. We had to save those guys. The skies were all lit up, you know, all the lights were on, everything. We knew we had won. We had damaged them severely. It was a definite success. We really broke their back. After that battle, we could really take a deep breath, and you could see victory on the horizon. We had been damaged, and we were due for some work, and we were supposed to go to Australia. And we looked forward to that. You know, liberty in Australia was really nice. And at the last minute, they had found the equipment that could take the Iowa. I guess it could be brought to the Maddox Islands. So that killed the Australian deal, and we pulled into the Maddox, and we went in one of those big floaty tractors, dry dock, yeah. We got a call that they found that the Japanese had been going up north toward Formosa. So we went all out, flank speed, and everything was vibrating right at the top, 33 knots. And I was hanging on to the lube oil pumps because I was afraid the vibration was the harmonics were going to go a little too far and something would crack and we'd lose them. So I hung on them to dampen them. Well, we ran all the way from the Philippines to Formosa, like that. We knew a big mistake had been made, that we'd be sucked in. We had to make a high-speed run back, but the battle had already been decided by the time we got back. We had 2 planes on board ship. They were observers. We lost one of them. He had gone out because I guess we were going to engage the enemy out there, and we got in a typhoon. What this one did, he got in our wake, and he was struggling to stay in the wake because that was the calmest spot we could find. And then the next morning he was gone. And my God, typhoons can be unbelievable. You couldn't go out on deck. You'd be killed immediately because as the typhoon waves crash, they're like being hit with a crowbar, or you'd be swept off like that. It's an unbelievable sight. And it probably was Halsey. And we were out, you just ride those out, and some of the older tin cans had a problem because they used to wallow. That earlier design of the destroyers were kind of vulnerable that way. If they run out of fuel, because it takes so much fuel in a storm like that to stay alive, that some of them kind of tipped over and their stacks would pick up water and kill the engines. And if you're dead in the water, you're dead. I was rushing to general quarters when there was somebody lying down in my way. I thought about it afterwards. I just stepped over him, went on to my post. I thought to myself that I had become calloused. I never heard what happened or anything. Of course, mainly you're interested in your shipmates. Like I told you about that desertion that was attempted. We were in San Francisco, and we got a few days of liberty. We were living it up. Then we pulled out, and we were supposed to go back to the Pacific. They had all kinds of plans for us out there, And there were a bunch of, I don't know what the number was, maybe there were 20, 30 or something like that, who went over the hill because they didn't make the ship the last minute. They had all kinds of excuses. So they thought they were free and clear. Once our ship pulled out, they thought, well, boy, I'm not going back out there again, And so we just swung down to Long Beach and had them picked up, and they were all brought down there and put aboard, and then we took off to the Pacific. But none of my shipmates were in that bunch. Right. Frankly, the shipmates I was with, you wouldn't think of abandoning your shipmates. Right. This is war. Well, part of it was fun, and we were young. Yeah. No responsibilities. So yeah, certainly there were some. Some would read the Bible, when we went into combat. But unfortunately, he was down in the shaft alleys, which is a dangerous place. If you get any kind of a hit, man, you had it. I had done duty in the past when I was first on in the shaft alleys, and that's a cold and lonely place. Right behind you is where the shaft goes into the sea, with a screw on it and everything. The bearing is lignum vitae. That was about right. That would be what, about 30 inches or 36? Inches. Yeah, 4 of them, yeah. Sometimes there were rumors, but as far as visibly seeing the action, we didn't often do that. I did see a lot of the action in the Marianas. I was able to, because we were there so long. They had to let us out and breathe, Yeah, I've been in there when they were firing, but I was supplying ammunition to the guns. When I first went in, I had my regular job, and then during combat, I was assigned to that. They're huge bags that you pass up. You just slide them, down there. They would tell you what the demand was. So we were handling them real fast. We were pretty good. The range was 25 miles, accurate. The Japanese Yamato class had 18-inch guns, but we had better range than they had. Oh, we went into assault Okinawa, and we were firing at Shuri Castle. The guns were blazing, and I got out a few times to see some of that. The kamikazes really came after us, and they were all over the place, and they kept coming in, and we kept shooting them down. One of the kamikazes came in out of the sun, for some reason, just slipped through, and he was on us. Even if we managed to get him, he was going to explode and cause a lot of damage. And he was coming in like this, and the Jersey was behind us. They were trying to get him, but it was just too late. He dove in like that, and then he pulled up like this, and his belly was facing the Jersey. and they shot him down. He just disintegrated. But I call that the case of the reluctant kamikaze. They were huge, I thought. I knew that they were going to be on bombing missions. I probably saw the ones take off that bombed Japan with the bomb, but I didn't know it. Then I heard about the bomb. I think that the bridge informed us about the success of the bombing. I heard something about Germany and some special bomb that they were working on and were going to employ in the war, and it was going to change everything. And when we heard about the bomb, we knew that we had won. We knew that there was going to be a peace signing. But what happened was we asked evidently for orders about the kamikaze because with peace pending, I forget whether it was King or Halsey, but he said to shoot them down in a friendly fashion. Initially, it was supposed to be on our ship, on the Iowa, and they changed it because, Truman was the president. It was kind of in deference to him. But they pulled in, and we pulled in right behind him. So we could see the ceremony. I couldn't because we were GQ, because it still was not peace,
Right. You might have to shoot somebody down in a friendly fashion.
Yeah. Or there might be some forces left, just like the Emperor's Guard, the Imperial Marines. They were a little unhappy about the actual signing, and there might be some trouble. If I had been able to go on deck, I could have watched the ceremony. There was that one admiral, and I can't remember his name, but he didn't want to go to war against the United States. And he said that they would lose. But he had received his orders, and he did what he could. They were fighting under a god, and they had to do everything that they could. And besides, orders are orders. So he swung into line, but he never believed in the war. The ship we sank was a cargo ship rather than a tanker. And I got this chance to see, which didn't happen often. We'd hit it. I guess I don't think we hit it with 16s. It had heeled over, and it was sinking. And the sailors, Japanese sailors, were crawling up on the side of the ship, and we rescued them. And I got to go aboard her, because it had to be checked out to see if somebody had been able to plant bombs or anything on it, under the equipment, or as you came aboard, the whole ship would blow up or something, I knew I was going to go aboard it, and this one guy, he asked me, what do we do? And we go aboard it. I said, well, we test equipment, and they want to know what's going to blow up, And he didn't like that. Sailors are different. When they lose their ship, the war is over. So when they came aboard, they were scared as hell, but very, very respectful and everything. Of course, they were in our hands, and there was no question of them fighting or anything. For them, the war was over. And they were kids, like me. When we were closing in on Japan, we raked the whole coast of Japan, up to Hokkaido and back. We just raked them, and we were selecting our targets. There were some things we would leave, like the cranes, the harbor, and so on. Some things that they felt we could use, but other than that, we just devastated. Maybe we were 10 miles away, and we had a 25-mile range and a 30-mile range. So we did some devastation, and I saw it afterwards. I went ashore in Japan the day after the signing. They could only allow so many men to go ashore, so they made me a shore patrol. So I had the armband on here, and so I was escorting the other guys, more or less. So whatever time we had, I moved around and saw devastation everywhere I looked. And I saw such devastation that I don't know what kind of a fight they could have put up. The only body that I knew of that they had going for them were the Imperial Marines, who were the safeguards for the Emperor. They looked at you as you were walking around, but nobody made a move. I don't think the toll would have been as terrible as originally thought, because, they did fight to the death and all that, but I don't think they had anything to fight with. I couldn't see how the hell they could fight any longer. There was nothing. I think we could have just walked in. They had cars that had a thing in the back that burned charcoal and ran off the fumes of the charcoal some way, I don't know. Some of them looked like Fords. There was no food. The only sign of food I saw was the little basket, and it had some of the little tiny fish, dried fish in it. That's the only food I saw. This one guy, Japanese, seemed like very intelligent, I think he was probably a professor or something, and he spoke to me in English. He said to me, eating is so difficult. You know, you're starving, you know. So I had some lifesavers, 2 or 3 rolls of lifesavers, and I gave them to him, you know. But man, I didn't see any food at all. They were absolutely defeated. They were just glad to survive, hungry and desperate. They just wanted some food. Oh, we took on prisoners, American prisoners, and they all had that same look. They had pot bellies and pipe stem arms and looked totally beaten. They probably were dispensed to some a medical ship. The war was over. Everybody had been in the war. Nobody even discussed the war. If you ran into a buddy, he might say, where were you? Because some people were in Europe and someone, and I said, I was in both sides, you know, and that was the end of it. But see, because everybody was in the war, it became a non-subject, you know, and it's not something you'd want to bore anybody with, you know. And you wanted to put it behind you because you had to make a living somehow. Yeah, we were busy all the time, really. The only time we had to take a deep breath was after the Marianas. I was in 34 battles. The only reason I know that is because I was in 10 campaigns, and they said there was an average of 3.4 battles in each campaign. You know, I was in combat mode 33 months out of the time I was in the Navy.
Did you ever think for a minute that you weren't going to win the war?
No.
Never for a minute?
No. We were the good guys, and they were the bad guys. And that was, you concentrated on one thing. You know, there were so many battles, and we went from one to the other. And your whole life was concentrated on that, you know. And that was your life. And then when you get out, that life was no longer a part of you.